Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our audience who joined us from across the globe for the first time webinar on why customer data platforms are preferred to deliver best-in-class customer experience, featuring leading MarTech and growth analyst Joe Stanhope from Forrester. In today's webinar, we're going to deconstruct a very popular statement that all brand experiences are customer experiences, and in fact, which is a reality as well. The fact of the matter is that since pandemic, a way customer interacts with your brand has greatly changed. And what has also changed is the customer's expectations of customer experience delivery standards. So the question remains, is your technology stack equipped to deliver a world-class multi-channel cross-tool customer experience? And why do we say that CDP is going to be that technology for you? To answer these questions and some more, we are being joined by Joe Stanhope, VP and Principal Analyst Forrester. He is a leading expert on all things marketing and technology. He has done some very focused research and extensive studies on enterprise marketing software suites, customer analytics, cross-channel campaign management, customer data platforms, and identity management. Welcome, Joe. Joe is being joined by Aditya Bhamidipati, founder and CEO. Aditya, with his experience of having been founded and expanded full stack customer data platform designed to address data-driven growth challenges for large enterprises, brings with himself first-hand experience and stories of how brands across financial services, retail, and distribution were able to resolve customer experience delivery challenges and clock growth at unprecedented level with a customer data platform. Welcome, Aditya. Before I hand over the screen to our speakers, a quick overview of the session flow. The first part of the session will be led by Joe, wherein he will share the industry overview and insights on customer data platform and its tie back into customer experience. He would be followed up by Aditya, who from his personal experience of having worked with some world-class brands on the delivery of customer experience, will share some real-life case stories. This will be followed up by a fireside chat where we'll be posing a lot of questions to Joe. And these questions have been put together based on the feedback that we've received from the audiences and our engagements and interactions with some of the industry leaders. The last 10 minutes of the webinar has been reserved for the audience Q&A. Please use the feature present right at the bottom of your screens, the Q&A feature, to pose any questions that you may have. Having said that, please do not leave the questions only for the last 10 minutes. Keep them coming throughout the webinar. Over to you, Joe.
There are large organizations from media and social and commerce that and advertising that are heavily involved in customer relationships. If you think about things like Amazon or Apple, those kinds of companies, they have their own relationships with customers and they create their own lens by which brands engage with and understand their customers, which is both beneficial and disruptive. And of course, if you reflect upon your own life, of course, you realize that customers have very high expectations for how their interactions with brands are going to proceed. We expect seamless experiences across all channels. We expect relevance. It's sort of to the point now where I would say that we expect brands to be fairly omniscient in the way they engage with us. We have just really high expectations and we advocate for those and we seek those experiences out. And of course, we're still developing the delivery of experiences. It is certainly a moving goalpost. And at Forrester, we would say that there's still a lot of cognitive load and experiences on consumers to figure out what they want and how they're going to get it and where they're going to find those experiences. And we're still learning how to be proactive with all of these new capabilities around data and channels and technology to deliver the most streamlined, efficient experiences to consumers. But I think if we take this to its logical conclusion, and again, look at this through a customer point of view, what we see is that the actual buying cycle is evolving. Now, at Forrester, we kind of have a 6-point cycle of customer experiences. You perhaps have more or fewer stages in the way you've thought about it in the past, or maybe you have more of a funnel type approach. And those are perfectly fine. But Traditionally, marketing and selling have been very much about persuading, right? Acquire a customer, get them to buy, have them use the product, make them an advocate over time, and create long-term value. And that's evolving because of all of these trends. What we're really seeing is a tremendous shift in the way the buying cycle works. And consumers' expectations are changing, and they become much more tolerant of and willing to experiment with new ways of consuming products. So we're really seeing some new business models take hold. And a lot of this revolves around, you might have seen it with direct-to-consumer brands blowing up, or even a shift to services, right? Think of streaming content services. You used to go to a store and get a disc or a DVD at the rental place and bring it home and use it on your own hardware. And now we pay a monthly subscription fee to stream that same content, right? Instead of buying in advance to pay to own something in perpetuity, now we oftentimes are looking at it as a service that we consume and pay for on a monthly, regular basis. And that is a huge trickle-down effect, of course, on customer engagement, because it really creates balance now between having to think about not only acquisition, but really loyalty and avoiding churn. We understand now that we have to meet consumers' preferences for having these experiences without the commitment to paying for everything, or at least not up front. And it makes retention really mission critical in the marketing world, right? Because that's the real revenue driver. Getting the customer to understand the value and constantly renewing that on whatever payment schedule they're on. It also motivates companies, I think, to really focus on their product, right, as the engine of growth, because it's the product that creates the motivation to continue with a service and to continue paying for it. And of course, in addition to all of the general disruption in the marketplace that we see, we have exogenous factors, namely data deprecation. Now, Forrester data deprecation is an umbrella term that describes multiple simultaneous trends that all affect how brands and enterprises access and utilize data. And it breaks down in four critical parallel areas: evolving consumer activity, the evolving regulatory and privacy environment, of course, the effect of so-called walled garden companies on how they collect and distribute and provide access to the data within their own ecosystems. And most popularly, technology changes, changes to browser technologies or mobile operating system technologies, the likes in particular of Google, talking about, sometimes delaying, making changes to how their Chrome browser is going to change access to third-party cookie data. Or Apple's making changes to iOS to change how the advertising IDs within their system would be available to developers and advertisers. These all have a dramatic effect on how we identify customers, how we measure campaigns, how we target customer communications, and even how we buy and execute those campaigns. And what that's doing is creating a significant sea change in the requirements that marketers have to engage with their customers. It drives things forward and forces quite a bit of change. There's two big dimensions, again, from the customer perspective, where you see these shifts. One, the breadth of engagement. We engage across more devices and touch points, and the granularity drills down from audiences and segments to getting close to the individual level. And that's the expectation. So when we're thinking about it, and we term it moments-based marketing, to take all these changes into account. What we're really talking about, reaching individuals at the time of their interaction. And we need the kind of technologies and data capabilities to help us predict what customers want, to operate in near real time, to scale up to the sheer number of interactions that are occurring, and to present and personalize the right kind of content that those customers expect. And so the operational side of marketing sees this dramatic shift based on all the changes that are happening in the marketplace. And to really bring this to fruition, to really maximize it, and in fact, to turn these disruptions into opportunities to excel, we have to take a different approach to being successful. And it needs to be more than just technology. Of course, technology is going to play a very big role in this, but really what we're seeing is balancing out the technology and the data needs, because data becomes that proverbial fuel in the engine of technology. We find that data is very much the differentiator that companies have to execute and engage with their customers. So we've got to start balancing our view of data and technology and making upgrades to both data and tech in lockstep with one another. Now, of course, sometimes this is challenging, right? And what we see is really interesting, that many times availability of data is not the challenge. Companies report to us that they have data available a lot across a lot of different capabilities, a lot of different source systems. The data is literally all around us. The challenge that exists today is leveraging or utilizing the data. So we have access to data in most situations, but we're underusing it. It's a connectivity between collecting data and being able to generate insights and deliver experiences based on that data. And what that means is we've really got an integration challenge. Now, integration has become top of mind for marketing executives over the past few years. If the data utilization challenge is really about integration, then we need to start thinking about how our various tools and data integrate with one another. And as we've seen in the previous data, a lot of that data is very fragmented right now. So we need systems that can help us bring it together and put it to work. So we're really talking about how do we apply the data in a coordinated way. Marketers are aware of this. They tell us that they're increasingly prioritizing, they're thinking about integration when they use or buy new technologies. They want to integrate with a broader set of technologies. They want to bring like advertising and marketing technologies together, and that gives them a fuller view of that full customer journey as it evolves. And they're less concerned about pure best of breed type implementations. They're really thinking that we're going to have multiple kinds of technology and data sources, but we need something to help us bring it together. And in fact, that's where they tell us the biggest struggles are with their current technology investments. And what's interesting to me is that marketers care about multiple dimensions of integration. How do we integrate data? How do we create integrated workflows across the various applications that interact with a customer? And from a pure marketing perspective, how do we integrate the orchestration of experiences? How do we have multiple channels orchestrated out of a singular environment? And this is where the CDP comes into play, because the customer data platform, that concept sits at the intersection of all of these needs and all of those trends. If we want to do more with data, if we need integration, the CDP provides a way that we can think about making this happen in practical terms. So the CDP now gives us this opportunity to provide a hub, if you will, even a proxy for integration at the data level that brings that stack together to deliver the data and the insights and the capabilities to systems as they create customer experiences. We think of at Forrester a CDP as something that centralizes customer data from multiple sources and makes it available to systems of insight and execution. And the CDP then has this potential to support this dramatic shift in marrying technology and data. So what can the CDP do for us? One, it provides a place to build robust customer profiles. It's a good time to be a marketer insofar as there's a lot of data available, and that's very exciting and has a huge amount of potential. But we need a system that can bring all that data together, not just collect it, but actually build those customer profiles. And the CDP can help us do that. Next, we need to expand the data that we look at. And a lot of companies struggle with using behavioral and contextual data, and the CDP provides a strong option for adding that data into the customer profile. And contextual data is so powerful because it's unique to your company, it's directly from your customers, and it can be applied so broadly in so many different ways. It is sometimes challenging to collect because it can happen in real time all the way out to daily, weekly, monthly, annually. But if you have the right system like a CDP to collect that data and align it with profiles, then really the world's your oyster. You can apply it in so many different ways. You can use it in your static targeting and audience development. You can use high-speed contextual data to trigger interactions. You can also use it dynamically to apply a personalization strategy and make determinations around what to show that customer at the right time or where to engage with them in the right way. So there's a huge amount of potential in contextual data and fully leveraging it because it's underutilized today, but we need a system like a CDP to help us do that. Once we have the data available, then we can start making meaningful changes towards a very evolved, what I would call individualized personalization strategy. Personalization is a concept that so many organizations and marketing teams are working towards a day. They want to have stronger targeting, stronger individualized interactions designed for their customers and delivered in the right time to the right place. But you can only do that if you have the right kind of speed and velocity to deliver that data, and you have that full set of data to be able to look at, to apply to that personalization strategy. Now, as you're thinking about a system that can help you do that, like a customer data platform, there's a lot of different options out there. Many marketing organizations have varying needs, and there's a lot of different kinds of CDPs to help accomplish that. So if you're committed to doing this and you want that CDP, that makes a lot of sense. The concept is very, very appealing and has, again, a huge amount of potential. But we've got to be a smart consumer of the customer data platform. And we've got to make sure that your organization acquires the right tool for the job. The number one thing that you can do to ensure success with a customer data platform is to understand how you're going to use a CDP and make sure that your CDP meets that need, which sounds straightforward and even a little bit obvious, I will confess, but it's harder than it sounds. All CDPs have a set of core functionality around ingesting data, building a profile, and providing egress to various systems for insights and customer engagement. But beyond that, there are many specialty areas. Forrester breaks the CDP category up into 4 subcategories: data management, measurement, automation, and orchestration. And those confer specialty functionality. These things, to be very clear, are not positive or negative or good or bad. All these types of CDPs are good at what they do and provide a lot of potential capability. But you want to make sure that you understand how you're going to use a CDP. What kind of personalization strategy do you have? How do you want to engage, and where do you engage with your customers? What kind of insights do you want to generate about your customers? What kind of source systems do you use for data, or what are you going to connect it to actually execute customer experiences? Once you define what I would call your use cases, then you can determine the right kind of customer data platform that will meet your needs. And that allows you really to control that process of finding the right provider and making sure that their capabilities are going to deliver what you expect and actually what your customers expect. Past that, features and functionality, which are very important, you want to look for solution maturity, both at a solution level and at a provider level with your CDP vendor. So these are the 3 areas where I tell people to give special attention to. Performance and security. You want to make sure that the infrastructure, the underlying technology systems that the CDP is built on top of, works at the same rate and in the ways that you expect it to. Oftentimes, this means exploring concepts like real time. How quickly does the system ingest and process and execute data needs? A lot of companies talk about that terminology, but it can mean different things to different people. So you have to be specific about what kind of performance requirements you have. Also, you want to make sure it meets your security requirements, which again sounds obvious, but shouldn't be taken for granted. You're talking about using some of your most valuable data about your customers. You want to make sure that any provider you have is up to the task of keeping that data safe. You want to have data intelligence, not just passing data from A to B, which is not what a CDP should do. You want a CDP to add value to your data. So can it enrich data? Can it build robust profiles? Can it execute models and machine learning capabilities to make that data essentially smarter and better than how it found it, so that it can support a robust personalization and customer interaction strategy? And then maturity in terms of services and support. Does your provider have mature capabilities for helping you deploy the technology, manage the technology? Do they provide customer success teams to help you on an ongoing basis, getting trained and using it and figuring out how to continuously improve your use of the product? This is really important. You're making a long-term commitment. You have a lot riding on the success of the CDP. You want to make sure that they have the resources, the processes, the staff in place to help make you successful. I hope you'll look into that, and I hope that you'll think about using a CDP, and you'll do it with a view towards, again, your use cases and what your organization needs. You'll be strong about that, and then you'll dive underneath the hood and make sure that every aspect of your provider meets all of your needs at a company and solution level. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Aditya, and he's going to talk us through a couple case studies where we've seen CDP success play out in real life.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that, and some really good points that Joe covered for us in his session. And for those of us who've been in the CDP space or tracking the CDP space, the biggest thing that CDPs have been able to address, like Joe said, is really how do you deal with the evolving customer interaction landscape that enterprises are having to deal with, and the realization that a lot of the most successful enterprises that are out there are really building growth on top of great customer experience. And therefore, how can an enterprise really bring all of that intelligence that is theoretically accessible to the enterprise when there is a consumer and the enterprise interacting with each other at that interface? How do you bring that back into the enterprise to become smarter so that every incremental interaction adds to the intelligence within the enterprise to deliver better, more seamless, more consistent, and more cohesive customer communication and nudges so that you're eventually delivering better customer experience? And we've seen this play out across a variety of industries and a lot of different stages of the strategy of the company towards this transformation. The way some of the points that Joe touched about, we've seen basically 3 or 4 different interesting bottlenecks in an enterprise's journey to this eventual goal of delivering best-in-class customer experience. The first is, Joe mentioned about the access to data. A lot of companies today have an access to a lot of data, especially as they start focusing more and more on the first-party data, given the environment around second and third-party data access. The enterprises do realize that they do have access to a lot of meaningful and unique differentiating first-party data. However, theoretical access to that data does not necessarily mean that data or insights are actually available inside the enterprise for them to be able to use that. Even if that data or insights are being brought into the enterprise, the access for the teams on the front lines to actually be able to utilize that in delivering differentiated, personalized, and real-time conversations or nudges is again something that enterprises face a bottleneck on. So eventually this kind of comes back to the core capabilities that you need within the enterprise to not just be able to connect the tools, but really to allow for the data and insight portability. So you really start becoming and thinking like a future autonomous enterprise, where you have data on one side, you have interactions which are generating this incredible amount of intelligence. How do you really process all of that data and make sure that it's available back in real time or in near real time for you to be able to make a meaningful, personalized conversation back to that individual, and you're not broadcasting it to a segment or to a group? And that's really where CDPs are really making a difference as a full stack CDP. That is really the essence of what FirstHive brings to the table. The ability to bring in a wide variety of data that an enterprise today has to deal with, whether it is voice, text, video, images, transaction data, and so on. And how do you then make sure that all of us is coming together to deliver this single unified understanding? And then how do you make sure that that understanding is then ubiquitously available within the enterprise's delivery node systems to deliver that consistent customer experience? I want to touch here on 2 specific examples from 2 different industries. As some of you may be aware, FirstHive is today one of the most comprehensive customer data platforms in the world, and we focus primarily on 2 verticals: financial services, which basically covers banks, insurance, credit unions, mortgage companies, and so on, and distribution, which is retail, CPG, manufacturing. So I've picked one interesting story from each of these 2 industries to kind of share what kind of impact FirstHive is able to deliver. So the first I want to talk about is actually a large global asset management company with over with operations across multiple countries. And like every large enterprise, they had a large number of systems which were delivering customer engagement or customer transactions. They have dependence across their distribution networks, they have direct to consumer engagement. But despite all of this, and despite having a lot of uh, core customer information data like customer identity data, there was inability to get to that single customer view at an enterprise level. And because of that, most of the campaigns, most of the conversations were localized, were restricted to the specific channel, and so were the analytics. Now, when First Hive came in, the first thing that First Hive did was really to ensure that we brought in all of the data that was technically available in terms of access, but was not really able to come into the system because of constraints of the node systems. Because the purpose of existence of some of these node systems, whether it's a CRM, it's an automation tool, and so on, is really to do their job better, not really securing the enterprise's first-party data control. And that is the first thing that First Hive did, which is to ensure that all of the data flowed back into this single unified layer, which is where the first-party data gets secured. And then as the data starts flowing in, our proprietary unification algorithms then start connecting all of the data and enriching all of the data with all the structured and unstructured information, connecting the known and anonymous interactions and so on, so that you now have a true 360 on your customers. As that data now starts becoming available, First Hive starts acting as that central system of intelligence, or the central brain in a multi-headed hydra, where you now are able to make orchestration decisions which are across all of your different tools and all of your different channels, but from a single brain, which is now able to deliver to you that controlled customer experience delivery, where each one of these different tools and channels can really be brought into play to deliver your intended orchestrated customer experience. And because of this, now there is the ability to trigger and nudge on real time conversations, customer message delivery, or even bring into play your own internal teams and channel teams to be able to deliver the intended message to the end consumer. Now, as a result of this, we were able to help the enterprise unlock over 5 times more data than what they had access to before First Hive came in. You're not just delivering personalization and custom message delivery to known customers, but also pre-login personalization, and then the ability to deliver real-time access to this information, both to marketers as well as to the analytic teams, because now the data bench that analytic teams will have access to with First Hive, they actually get access to all of the underlying raw time series data, because of which they're able to build and deploy models which are better and faster and iterating on it faster, because we're closing the loop on being able to give them access to the data and then deploy that back. And of course, one of the differentiating accelerators that First Hive also brings to the table is the ability to plug into applications that drive velocity on outcomes, which enhance ROI, which is where, again, we've been able to allow the brand to utilize all of this data for influencer engagement, for their lead management systems, and so on and so forth. So very, very interesting applications that have been enabled, but all on top of the core CDP value add, which is to be able to bring in data, connect the data, enrich the data with insights, and then most importantly, ensure availability, access, and application of the data to drive customer experience. I want to switch now to a completely different industry, which is in the retail fashion space. This customer of First Hive is like most large, it's a listed fashion outlet, has both physical stores and digital stores. And the goal of the enterprise here was essentially to be able to, and it's a house of brands. So it has multiple brands, and each one of these brands has multiple formats in which they operate. The goal of the enterprise was to be able to get to that single customer view across all of their different brands and different formats. So they're now able to deliver consistent, relevant pushes to the customer and ensure that they're actually able to help the customer go through her journey across each of the different channels that the customer can engage with the brand. Like with the financial services customer, what FirstHype did was essentially first and foremost ensure that there is unlocking of data. Second, it is to ensure that the brand bridges this gap between marketing data and the inorganic acquisition channels around advertising. So we actually ensure that there is the bridge between the ad tech channels and the martech channels, the offline data and the online data, and ensure that we're able to deliver not just the behavioral nudges, but also plug in back into couponing for nudges into the most relevant next purchase, ensuring that there are recommendations that are coming in around preferred channels, preferred content, SKUs, the time of nudge, and so on and so forth. And all of this layered with the cross-channel orchestration that FirstHype unlocks. There are over 700 integrations that FirstHype brings to the table. And those are things that allow for rapid deployment as well as rapid exchange of data across different node systems that FirstHype can enable. Again, here, because of all the capability that FirstHype brought, we were able to deliver over a 20x ROI to the enterprise on their campaign spends, the ability to unlock journeys that previously the enterprise could not deliver, drive very, very interesting attribution for the enterprise because of the nature of complex sale process that they have. And because of the complexity on the formats, the ability to attribute became a huge value add in terms of their ROI drive, as well as the ability to do both cross-sell and upsell across all their different brands as well as different formats. So very powerful, impact that FirstHype was able to drive with the CDP and the full stack capabilities that FirstHype really brought to the table. So that's really short that I wanted to keep from my side. Just hopefully to make sure that everybody here gets a sense of what is the kind of impact that a full stack CDP can typically get to the enterprise, how it allows the enterprise to really go through not just the integration of data, but really unlocking the access of data, ensuring that you are not just becoming a data connecting layer, but really unlock and connect the data layer. So you're actually unlocking incremental identities, you're unlocking incremental insights, and you're enabling data and insight portability across the enterprise to drive the intended experience that you want. A good full stack CDP essentially becomes a critical tool in ensuring that the enterprise is future-proofing itself as we walk towards a more autonomous enterprise design. We are getting into new interfaces which are constantly unlocking for an enterprise, and there is going to be an increased demand on making sure that every interaction with a consumer is personalized, and you're not really getting the consumer to you. You're able to go to the consumer with the most relevant content. And there are really interesting concepts around not just a cookie-free world, but really a website-free world and so on, where really content is going to come to you, which is every interaction completely personalized. And in that era and that world, whether it is a browser-based world or meta universe and all of this, the ability for the enterprise to make sure that it's capturing, unlocking, and using insights in real time becomes extremely crucial in delivering customer experience. That's kind of what I wanted to touch. Before we open up though for the audience questions, I had a few questions. So Joe, I was making a few really interesting points from your slides, and I had put down a couple of questions before we can open up the audience. But the audience can please start shooting their questions, and we will take them after maybe about 5-6 minutes. The first one, Joe, is, you spoke about all of the different changes that that are being made from in the marketers world, right? Which are creating quite a few ripples, if not more, in the marketers world. Whether it is the regulations from device and OS providers or cookie deprecation. Can you double click on that, and how do you see that change, and how do you see marketers kind of adjusting to that reality, and where does the CDP kind of come in there?
Yeah, it's the data deprecation issues certainly do create ripples. I think that's a great way to describe it. And it's very relevant today. I mean, I think a lot of the discussion, especially when it comes to things like cookies, has been in the digital advertising and display, right? Where you have that ecosystem that is historically very, very cookie dependent. All of kind of the infrastructure and processes revolve around cookies. So obviously changes to that are disruptive, to say the least, ripples. It's also just kind of very timely and interesting that just yesterday, as if, they were thinking about ripples over at Google, they decided that they're going to be changing some of the timing of when they're going to change the Chrome browser out to probably the end of 2024 now. So it's very much a situation that's been in flux. But really, some of these changes have been in process for quite a long time. This is not necessarily new. It is happening. It will happen in some way, shape, or form. And I would just caution people in general, just because maybe Google made some changes to some of their timing, that doesn't make any of this less important or urgent, right? We've got to be considering how this affects us. How it affects most marketers, and where the CDP opportunity comes into play, is that one of the net effects of all these changes across all of the data deprecation exogenous issues, not just cookies, is that it forces us to refocus on first-party data, as companies, as marketers. So, when you're thinking about, okay, what data are we going to have? What data can we leverage? What data becomes effectively the gold standard in a data deprecated world? It's the first-party data. And let's just say, conveniently, CDPs are by definition, designed for handling first-party data, generally PII-oriented customer data. So that's a very convenient fit, right? Where you have a world where our attention is going to turn towards the first-party data asset, fully leveraging that data, making the most of it. CDPs are a system that are designed literally to help us do that. And so that's a great fit, and a great fit in time that this is happening. These things are kind of colliding right before our very eyes. So if we shift the emphasis of marketing at large on the first-party data, first-party data becomes not just a gold standard, the only standard. A lot of companies are thinking about, well, can we use a CDP to maximize our ability to collect, align, use, deploy that first-party data? And to be fair, first-party data is not a magic cure-all or perfect backfill, right? Especially in ad tech for what's changing over there. But the new reality is very much a consented first-party world. And the CDP provides that kind of a facility. Also, it provides potential in the mid to long term about making more of first parties close cousins. The second and zero party data now have a lot more emphasis, a lot of potential. A CDP is in line to help with those types of data, as well as we look to maximize the first party data asset. So, the long and short of it is, I see CDPs having a huge opportunity, a lot of potential for brands, as playing a big part in collecting and managing that critical first party data asset.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for that. I think we're all watching the world and the evolution on that side very closely.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think the interest in enterprises on being able to get both the zero party data as well as the second party data to play with the first party data in the CDP is something that we are seeing as well. Yeah, we'll all continue to watch the trend, I guess. The next question I had, and this is a common refrain that I'm sure you hear a lot more from marketers, is all of the different let's say the 3-letter acronyms floating around, right? Which create, I'm sure, a lot of confusion. CRM, CXM, CDP. How do you see all of this kind of, what do you advise a marketer when they get bombarded with all of these things?
Yeah, I empathize. It happens to me too. It's my job to know all this stuff, and it's even hard for me sometimes. So, if you're just Googling it, I understand the challenge of the alphabet soup and the all the acronyms.
Right.
A lot of the categories, strangely enough, I suppose, are very legitimate. It's not that those categories and those acronyms are wrong or bad. It's part of it. It just comes with the general growth of marketing technology and customer engagement technology. And of course, we talked earlier about, the ongoing spread, right, and fragmentation, right, of customer experience into so many channels and touch points and departments and organizations. With that comes a supporting layer of technology, and that fragments, right, essentially along with customer experiences. It's a somewhat organic occurrence that we're in this kind of place with that ecosystem. And certainly on paper, it is fair to say that there's a lot of overlap between these categories. I mean, a great example, and this happens, I think, with CDPs often, and I'm sure that you see it, is, almost all of these systems collect data in some form or fashion, right? And that gets you to start thinking about, well, then what is a CDP and what isn't if everything collects data? And that's an oversimplification for sure. But if you're just, again, if you're on Google, if you're just looking at a quick list, or you don't spend all day thinking about these things, it looks very similar, right? And that is not anybody's fault because they're not wrong. I think what you have to look at is, I generally regard it as the tool sets have become extremely specialized. So they are not as overlapping, even if some of the words are the same, as they might initially appear. So, and they operate kind of at different tiers in that marketing technology taxonomy. So you could say marketing engagement, like email messaging, right? Or push messaging in mobile apps. Those as a construct, right, are a part of customer experience, right? They're a component of customer experience. They are a way of interacting with customers alongside other ways of interacting with customers, like commerce or service or a contact center. All of those are essentially endpoints in connecting with a customer, right? And they have their own set of specialist technologies that are designed to work with that kind of customer engagement touch point. And as such, they have the right functionality, right, for the users, right, on the brand side who are doing the interaction, the needs of those channels, and they collect or store the necessary data to execute in those environments. So yeah, do they collect data? Do they do maybe some orchestration? Yes, and that seems similar. But the way they do it is very specialized for their given kind of slice of the customer experience. When you get into, and CRM is one of these, and that term comes up a lot. It's the term CRM, of course, has been around for many, many years. This is one of those environments, and it contains the data and functionality that would be needed to support customer-facing interactions, typically from a sales or selling perspective, right? Now, the CDP has a different job to play. And again, there could be some theoretical overlap, but really there isn't. The CDP really operates at a different level of tech stack, right? It is designed to really collect data across all of these systems and create that kind of cross-channel view or an agnostic view, right? And build that profile of the customer, and then supply a robust data set, firstly to marketing tools, but really across any customer engagement tool. So the CDP is not, say, an endpoint of customer engagement. It's really, in a sense, a data hub. And hopefully, as we've discussed a couple times already, a smart one, right? And a one that has enrichment and intelligence about it, not just data transit. But it sits in the middle of these tools to create a robust and consistent data set. So it has a different role to play in this stack of technologies. I think what it means for buyers is they have to really understand their own business model, where they interact with customers, and what data they want to use to do so. And that allows you then to kind of not be a prisoner, right, of all these acronyms, but to think about, here's exactly what I need. And here are the specific tools, right, that are sophisticated enough and connected enough to help me do the customer engagement that I want to. And if I want to set it up this way, I put a CDP really in the middle of that to give it all that fuel, right, for the engagement engine.
Got it. No, I think that's a great explanation. I actually have a few follow-on questions on just that, but I have a nudge from Jashan that there's just one last question for the fireside before we take the audience. So one other interesting question that does come up in a lot of organizations that we talk to is, and I'm sure this is one of those areas that you must be getting a lot of inbound for advice from companies, is how do they leverage a CDP well? What kind of maybe organization design transformation they have to do, which all teams typically could consume data. And we've seen, for example, analytic teams as being an incredible consumer of the data that the CDP creates. What has been your view in terms of these two things? I mean, what have you seen happening in the market in those organizations that have leveraged a CDP better? What have you seen from an org design and which teams are consuming?
Yeah, we encourage, I think like you do, we encourage organizations to take a broader view of the applicability of a customer data platform. I think it does start out oftentimes from a marketing perspective, supporting marketing customer engagement use cases. It's been relatively focused on that. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think one of the nice things about a customer data platform is they are extensible platforms that can grow and evolve over time without replatforming, right? I think that's a big part of the value proposition. And organizations don't have to, say, boil the ocean and do everything on day one with a CDP. They can get started with a few use cases or a specific area that they want to focus on, like marketing, and then expand it over time, relatively efficiently, right? I think that's a really nice benefit, actually, because you want to avoid, in my opinion, these 2-year-long monolithic projects, right? The nice thing about a CDP is it can deliver value very quickly, essentially out of the box, and build from there. I think that's very powerful. So we see a lot of focus initially on marketing. I think oftentimes, increasingly, as you noted, we see it as well supporting analytics and data science. A lot of times those staff are involved in the vendor selection because they're so knowledgeable about the data and the core technologies involved anyway, alongside IT, of course, and security and so on. But a lot of times they're involved in the selection, but they also see benefits and get engaged with the CDP once they see what it can do, right? Because the CDP can provide a fantastic data source, a consistent data source to support analytics around customers, measurement, the modeling, and machine learning type projects that may be going on, as well as an endpoint to actually then deploy, right, models and analytics to, right, to again close that gap between having the data and making it actionable, right? So it can be closing the loop with the analytics team comes up more and more often, and they seem to be heavily involved and see it as a beneficial source, not only to get access to a really powerful set of data, but also to more efficiently support their, say, marketing or customer experience stakeholders in the business. So I would say that's a fast number 2. And now we're starting to see really the emergence of these broader customer experience applications, creating some consistency with commerce. I think the pandemic times where there was a lot of acceleration about commerce and marrying that up with marketing as a transition period very quickly. A lot of commerce integration, seeing more contact center type integration and value. So again, amortizing that CDP across all of customer experience, that's something that we've been waiting for and looking forward to at Forrester. And I think we're finally starting to see that emerge. But again, it's a stepwise, development project that we kind of take one set at a time. And then that's how we would recommend customers look at it too.
Got it. No, it kind of resonates with a lot of what we are seeing as well, and certainly means interesting days both for the enterprise in terms of being able to leverage all of that for driving experience, and for folks that are building the tool, folks like us at First Type, because then you have a larger canvas to deliver value to. All right, Jashan, with that, back to you. We stuck to the 3 questions, but not the 5.
Yes. We're not left with a lot of time for audience questions, and we've been bombarded with a lot of questions coming in. this is something that you already touched upon very briefly when you were covering, Joe, is the entire delay of cookie deprecation announcement, which came in by the end of 2024. So Vishal Sukhej, who's Chief Product Officer with Firsthive, is asking this. With Google delaying its deprecation of third-party cookie to 2024, will it cause brands to delay the choice of for a CDP or onboarding a CDP as one of the focus solutions that they should be looking at? Or will they use this time to double down and start building their first-party data assets and strategy, which they might have not done now?
Well, I think that waiting would be a mistake. This is, and in general, I don't think this will affect any momentum around interest in customer data platforms. As I mentioned, the most urgent concern around the cookie issue is around, delivery and scale of, digital advertising, which is somewhat parallel to the CDP. But even if Google is delaying this, cookies have been endangered and deprecated in other browsers already. The deprecation of identifiers in mobile operating systems is happening. So data deprecation, even through privacy regulations, is happening, right? Whether or not Google is involved, right? They just happen to be on a longer time frame. So this is happening. You have to adapt to it, and the longer you wait, the harder this gets. Now, the challenge to that is that some of it's still in flux. And that's where it is a little bit frustrating, right? We don't always know exactly what the end solution at Google is going to be or exactly when that's going to happen. Clearly, we don't know. And we don't control Google. But we do know this is occurring and that the third-party cookie is already relatively deprecated. So we are advising clients to start experimenting with new identification systems now to understand the impact and exposure to continuing data loss to the way they personalize, engage, execute campaigns, and to start harmonizing their first-party data strategy immediately. So we would strongly encourage people to keep moving on as if Google made no announcement yesterday. This is very important. It is going to happen, and waiting only hurts you.
Interesting. The next question that we have is, again, Joe, for you. There's an exponential growth of CDPs that has been in the last 5 years. Where do you see this market going for the next 5 years? And are there any gaps that the CDPs are expected to fill going forward?
Yeah, the market will certainly continue to evolve. It's a relatively young market, and every technology market goes through a natural development arc. I think it's maybe taken a little bit longer in CDPs than maybe in other technology markets, although maybe we're catching back up because of the pandemic and some of the economic fallout. But I think you're going to see a focus down on the vendors now that are the most committed to CDP excellence and solving for marketers' problems. And some vendors that were maybe historically less committed to the market will perhaps depart the market. And again, you see that in any denouement of any technology market, right? This naturally happens. And I think that's a healthy thing where we're going to start separating the strong committed vendors from those who are less so. And that only helps us make better buying decisions and commitments, right, as marketers. So we'll see that. I certainly think that some vendors are going to focus more on the enterprise, and you'll see like some of the marketing cloud vendors continuing to operate there as well, as they do. I think some vendors will end up focusing more on alternatives like the mid-market and B2B use cases. I think there will be some specialization for an underserved part of the market there. And so we'll see some of that. I also believe that some vendors will continue developing organically and find themselves in new categories. I believe that there's a potential for some of these vendors to become more CX oriented, kind of like what I've been talking about this whole time. Or they may become more focused on elements like customer analytics or even pure play campaign management, where essentially they evolve into a different category organically over time. And you end up with essentially, as opposed to a standalone CDP, a CDP plus application play. And there will be room in the market for all those things. Buyer needs are pretty diverse, and there is an appetite for different variants of the CDP theme. So I think there's room for all those plays at different levels of the marketplace and different spans of functionality.
Aditya, in continuation to what Joe just said, how you as a product leader and a product owner for CDP solution are preparing for the next 5 years? Like, what are the gaps from product point of view that you are planning to bridge for the customers?
I think at First Hive, the view that we're, I don't think a single webinar can go away, can happen without that phrase being used. At First Hive, the view that we are taking, is that eventually enterprises are moving towards autonomous enterprises, and you will need that autonomous decision-making capability at the core, which is where the CDP really sits. And therefore, a lot of the investments and the roadmap that we have is really around how do we make the data that the CDP is processing more intelligent? How do we layer it with more insights? How do we allow for more utilization or consumption of this data for more applications and more use cases for the enterprise? Because if you are looking at the CDP as the brain function, then you really cannot have a single organ that's away from consumption of the data. You have to be able to ingest and impact the experience that comes out of that area of the enterprise. And that's kind of how we are looking at the CDP piece.
I know we're out of time, but we have had a couple of questions which are touching upon the same topic. And this is just, I'll try to compress it into one single question and pose it to both Joe, you, and Aditya, you. A lot of them are actually asking about a customer data platform compared to CRM and data lakes and marketing automation tool. Like, there's so many software solutions out there which are basically speaking of the same language of the solution delivery. And I think a lot of us want to know as to what is a differentiator that a CDP gets on board for the end users as compared to the most of the similar solution providers. And from both, like, how do a CDP says that this is how they differentiate themselves, and also for the end user, like, what is the differentiating value that they get for themselves?
As in what the benefit is to.
Yes, in short. Yeah.
Let me see if I can summarize the question understanding. Your question is, there are data lakes, there are automation players, and then there is CDP. Data lakes and automation players seem to talk about similar use cases. How is the CDP different? Is that
exactly.
Is that the question?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Joe, you should probably take a stab at it. You see a lot of
so the CDP is providing a different slice of functionality, right? The CDP is not a replacement for marketing automation. It's not actually executing a campaign. It's providing the insights and the targeting and essentially the data, right, for that campaign. So make that campaign better. But typically it doesn't go as far as actually, MTA server sending an email. So it's a layer, that is complementary to most of these endpoint systems. That's how we look at it. Now, a data lake is a different, data storage and data usage approach. It usually accommodates different use cases. Most marketing data applications do not rely on data lakes. Most marketing applications tend to be far more, I would say, curated, although that's not the most technical term, but it's a defined set of data that is applied to marketing analytics and execution. Right. We would see more and expect to see more kind of data lake applications and kind of analytics and data science situations. And that's for a different set of users, different set of tools. So there are marketing databases that do exist, right? And those oftentimes, and even the data lakes can actually be feeds. Even a CRM system can be a feed into the CDP, right? As the CDP aspires to pull together a broader range of data, as we've been talking about, to create that broad customer profile. So really the CDP is kind of that data hub that's bringing together the broadest view of the customer from these various data sources as it's appropriate, and then making that data available rather than duplicating them.
Yeah, let me take a minute and try and respond to that, Jashan. I think when you look at it from a data lake standpoint, the purpose of the data lake typically tends to be one of storage, like Joe said, and therefore enterprises would put everything in there, right? But it's not intended to be an action system. The CDP, on the other hand, is intended to be an action system, which is about once I get the data, how do we enable consumption of the data and drive impact out of it? That's how, at least at First Hive, we look at this. So the data lake in a lot of enterprises is actually an integration point from where data is ingested and sometimes data is pushed back to. On the automation side, again, it just first principles, it's always easy to go back and ask, what is the purpose of existence of a particular tool? The marketing automation tool has no role in the enterprise if you tell the tool, don't send a single message, but still reside in my stack, right? And that tells you that tool's existence is to be able to deliver the messaging, not to manage the data for action, for impact for the enterprise. Whereas the CDP plays on the side of the enterprise, not on the side of itself. It is essentially curating all of the meaningful data, all of the identity data, and ensuring that it's available for impact and consumption. Therefore, a CDP can exist. If you tell the CDP, I don't want you to send a single message out, but do you still have a role? Absolutely. That is a very, very easy way to understand the role that these different tools play. Now, as a full stack CDP, you extend potentially to going into the segmentation, orchestration, delivery capabilities as a full stack CDP. But those are, let's call them as incremental capabilities. Those are ROI kickers for an enterprise. But the core value proposition of the CDP is really around taking control of the first party data for the enterprise and ensuring that data is available for consumption, orchestration, and impact.
All right. I think that kind of answers a lot of questions that we were getting, about 4 or 5 of them from the audiences. It was around this use cases or similar solutions, out there in the market. I think with that, we can conclude the webinar. Thank you so much, Joe and Aditya, for joining us, taking the time out from your schedules and putting together this extremely wonderful webinar, which was very insightful. And I hope our audiences enjoyed it as much as we did when putting it together. And in case you want to learn more about what CDPs can do to help you achieve a data-driven growth, please write to us at marketing@firsthive.com. Thank you so much.